So I may or may not be apocalyptically excited about this September setup. Oh my lord, it turned out so well, but more on that in a bit. Yes, it is almost September, so we are setting up our bullet journals for the month ahead. The theme that I've gone with for the month coming is Fireflies, as voted on by my patrons. So shout out to our patron team. Jumping in, we've got the projects list, and we're starting off with the 01 micron, or the 0.25mm nib, to draw in some little fireflies. You can see that, as usual, I've done some pencil sketching before coming in with pen, just to make sure that the placement of everything was where I wanted it. These fireflies are actually pretty straightforward to draw, and we'll talk more about how to do them when we get to a page that has over 30 fireflies. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what that page is for. I used the same size micron to do the lettering for our header, and then it was on to adding colour. Yeah, not a lot of blackline work on this page. For our yellow dot work in today's setup, we're using the Zig clean color dot markers, which are honestly like a staple item for me. I've used them in every monthly setup since I got them, and I feel like I rave about them in almost every Plan With Me video, so apologies if you've heard that before, but they're really good. As always though, all of the equipment that I've used in today's setup can be found linked in the description box below, along with other links to related videos and inspiration. Now, the main source of inspiration that I had for this theme came from Paperflight V over on Instagram. They sadly haven't posted for a while, but I super loved their use of the blue and the yellow together, along with that kind of messy strokes kind of look that you get with the decoration they've done. It kind of reminds me of a Van Gogh painting, and that style is kind of what I wanted to recreate in this setup. That kind of style is a little bit more outside my comfort zone, so while the fireflies themselves were really super easy to draw, the blue kind of waves that we have in the background, those were a lot more time consuming and a lot more difficult for me. Technically speaking, it is relatively straightforward. You're just doing a bunch of brush strokes with your brush pen. I personally started with the lightest colour, worked my way through to the darkest, and then used the lightest again to do some blending. But making sure that all of your brush strokes follow the direction of the wave was pretty important for the overall look. Once the blue was done though, I just went over the top of this with my white gel pen from Archer & Olive to add a bunch of tiny dots, another time-consuming part of the process. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, the projects list took about 16.5 minutes. But of course, as usual, this doesn't include idea generation time or sketching in time. Rather than drawing in more fireflies for the empty spaces that we have in the corners, I instead just went in with that dot marker again to add in some ones that essentially look like they're further away or more in the background, so you don't actually see the firefly details, you just see the little lights. If you were wanting to do a firefly theme and wanted a really easy, cheap way to do it, that's the way that I'd do it. Just using dots of colour. Before we get onto the cover page, I figured we'd have a quick flip through of how August turned out, just because I think it's nice to see how pages actually get utilised, rather than just what gets set up in the Plan With Me. For August, I went back to the original bullet journal method after having reread the bullet journal method book, and although there were elements of this stripped down system that I did enjoy, for instance, and surprisingly, the daily logging was something that I enjoyed quite a lot, there were certainly elements that I missed, like not having all of my monthly collections that I typically set up, and also not having a weekly overview. I do technically still have space in that B5 journal that I could have used for my September setup, but in part I was just way too excited to get into the B6, and I kind of like that each of my bullet journals this year have lasted me a third of the year. So the first one having lasted the first 4 months of the year, the second one being the second 4 months, and the one we're currently working on should take me till the end of December. I hope. There are less pages in this one, so I'm kind of worried. If all else fails, I'll just do December in the B5. As you can see though, for the cover page, we have a bunch more of those fireflies, and we're using that same scribbly script lettering for the header. This is a lettering style that I've been meaning to do in my planner for ages, but every time I think that I might do it, I always just end up doing clean lines on my calligraphy, rather than messy kind of sketchy lines, which is what I've done here. I feel that the kind of sketchy approach to the lettering is a bit more forgiving, because if a line is out of place, it looks like it was supposed to be there, because of the overall style of the lettering. Hopefully that makes sense. For the colour aspect of today's setup, along with the dot marker, I'm also using a collection of my Tombow Jaw Brush markers. For both the blue and the yellow, I have 3 shades, so a lighter shade or more kind of pastel colour, a bright colour, and then a darker colour. As mentioned, the numbers of those pens are linked in the description box. But for our yellows, I've used the lightest shade to do the kind of glowing element of each of our fireflies. The darkest yellow I've used on the fireflies themselves, just to add a little bit of shading or dimension. And then the brightest yellow is a really good color match for that dot marker. So I've just used it to do a little bit of blending on the fireflies themselves. For the blue pens though, the palest one is the one that I put on first when it comes to those blue waves in the background. Because it's as pale as it is a bit more forgiving to start with, so I use that one to sketch out where I want the waves to go to start with, and then I also go and put in all of those little kind of brush strokes to give me an overall direction to follow when I start putting on those darker or more saturated colours. Once the lightest blue is on, that's when I go in with the bright blue, or the medium colour. Here I'm just adding some depth to those blue waves by sprinkling in some of those brush strokes throughout the wave. I do really have to hold myself back from putting too many of those in, because otherwise it wouldn't really give me the look that I'm looking for. Once the bright and the medium blue are in, that's when we go and add in the darkest blue. And again, I need to be careful with this to make sure that I don't add too much. It's just there to give me some contrast, add some depth to the waves. If I put too much in, it'll end up looking too heavy. And the overall aesthetic that I'm going for in this setup is light and bright. Light, because they're fireflies anyways. As mentioned before, once those blues are in, then I go back in with the palest blue to do a little bit of blending. I know that I do want the brush strokes to still look separate from each other, but a little bit of blending just makes those dark blue sections look a little bit less harsh. Another thing that makes it look less harsh is also those white dots that I put on with the gel pen. Hopefully that description of how we achieve this look has been helpful. If you do have questions though, just leave them in the comments below. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, the cover page took approximately 40 minutes, and then it was time to flip on over to the monthly log. Very excited to be getting back to a calendar style monthly log for September. Although the vertical style is quicker to set up, I just find it difficult to visualize how full or not full my days/weeks are if it's not in a calendar grid. Of course, I am using a B6 notebook now, so the calendar grid has to be a little bit smaller, each of the boxes being 5 grid spaces across and 5 grid spaces down. I am curious to see how writing in these goes because it's a fair bit smaller than what I would consider to be my optimum amount of space. If I could have it, I usually prefer to have 8 squares across for any space that I'm writing in, but I made my peace with having 6 squares across in the A5, so I'm hoping that the 5 squares across that we have in this setup won't be too bad. To set up the monthly log though, I again went in first with my black line work, including the calendar grid, the fireflies, and that scribbly lettering again for the initials for each day of the week. On this spread I used 2 different sizes of the micron pens, so the 01 for the fireflies and the lettering, as we did on the previous spread, but for the calendar grid, because I wanted it to be a little bit more bold, for that one I used the 08 or the 0.5mm nib. After this, the process of decoration was effectively the same as the cover page and projects list. So putting in the yellow glow of our fireflies with that dot marker, emphasizing the glow with the light yellow Tombow, adding some details to the larger glowing sections, again with that dot pen, just using the bullet end this time, and then in with the blue waves, starting with the lightest blue first, followed by the medium to add some depth, then the darkest blue to add even more depth, and then blending it with that lightest blue again. Of course, we also have to number the calendar, and you can see that I used the dot marker again to highlight those numbers. Once the blue is in, I could then go and add in all of those little white dots, which took forever. But I do think that they're a worthwhile addition. After approximately 48.5 minutes, the monthly log was done. Yes, this one took a bit longer, there was a bit more decoration to be done, but I do think it turned out pretty well. Of the pages I set up today, the monthly log is probably my least favourite, just because I think I over-blended those blue waves. It probably could have used a little bit less blending, but flipping on over and we're on to my monthly challenges page. Did you guess it right? The page with over 30 fireflies? Yes, it is my monthly challenge page. So we're gonna have a firefly for each day of the month that I can colour in to represent whether I did or didn't complete the challenge. My general thinking at the moment is that any of the fireflies that are like lit up are going to be the ones that represent having done the challenge, and then I might colour in fireflies for days that I didn't complete the challenge, just in that darker yellow colour. As I mentioned before, the drawing of these fireflies is actually pretty straightforward. All you have to do is start with 2 teardrop shapes that meet at the point. These are going to be the outer wings of the firefly, and you need to position them so that they're a bit further than 90 degrees to each other, so a bit more than a right angle. The exact angle doesn't matter too much, just whatever looks good to you. Once you have the top wings in, then you can draw the bottom wings. These come out of that place that those 2 teardrops met and just curve around to then meet the side of the original teardrops. Hopefully you can kind of see what I mean by this. But it effectively looks like you've stacked 2 smaller teardrops underneath the original teardrops. And these are the lower wings. To draw the body of the firefly, you then just have to draw a curved line from one of the stacks of teardrops to the other. After this, it's really just about adding details. So I like to add in some little antennae, which are 2 little curving lines with small circles, which again come out of where those 2 original teardrops met. And then I just use a small black oval for the head. While you can leave them like this, I chose to add a couple more details to my fireflies, so adding some longer lines onto the top wings, and then some smaller lines on the lower wings and the body to kind of act like a shadow. A very cute and easy way to do fireflies. My monthly challenge for August has been daily logging, so making sure that I get into my bullet journal every day and write myself my daily list, which has actually been going really well and has kind of made me more motivated to use my journal, even though aspects of the original method that I was trying in August made me less likely to get in my journal. So it was kind of a balancing act. The monthly challenge that I'm thinking of going with for September is either daily stretching or possibly daily leisure. Something that I've been trying to do more so now that I'm not a teacher is actually having my evenings off. Because previously, when I was teaching, my routine was very much get up, go to school, come home, do content stuff, go to bed, which didn't really leave a lot of time for leisure. Now as I'm doing full-time content creating, it means that I have a lot more flexibility in my schedule, so I have been trying to incorporate daily leisure in there. With the monthly challenge page set up though, it's time to set up the actions list. Although I did not use my actions list at all in August, I am hoping to make more use of it in September. For this one, I'm using a very similar format to what I've used in the previous months, except on this one I won't be tracking the daily actions just because the page is a little bit smaller, so I'll instead track those daily actions on my weekly habit tracker. The monthly challenge page and the actions list took about 41 minutes to set up combined, but now we're flipping over and setting up my book tracker page. Because next month's book club book is already decided, instead of writing book club as the title, I instead used the book's title as the header. On this one, I'm setting up a little box for each of the chapters in the book, which I can colour in as I read that chapter. Because I didn't want to rule the boxes, because I thought that might take too long, I decided to do a thin double line for each of them. I thought this tied in nicely with the sketchy lettering we've been doing for the headers, and overall I think they turned out looking pretty cute. The book that we'll be reading for September is The Light at the Bottom of the World, and this one fills our sci-fi genre for the year. The way that our book club works, it's run by my friend Rachel and I, so at the end of last year we picked out 12 genres, one for each month for this year. A bit before the new month, we have a spinning wheel with each of those genres, so we spin to see what the genre is going to be for the month ahead. We only use each of the genres once in the year. As mentioned, for September, the genre that we spun was sci-fi, and because it's an odd-numbered month, Rachel is responsible for picking our book club book. I use the word picking here loosely because what we've actually been doing is setting up a poll of some different options and then having the community vote on them. So for September, the community voted for The Light at the Bottom of the World. If you wanted to get involved in our book club, we primarily run it through Discord, which is linked in the description box. Over there we have a dedicated thread each month to talk about the book, and we also have a monthly book club meeting, which is done as a voice/video chat. But the place that we hold the poll to pick the book club book is actually over on our Facebook community page, because I haven't figured out a good way to do polls on Discord yet. As mentioned, all the links to those places, anywhere that you can find us, they are also in the description box. And we would love to have you as part of our community. As you can see though, we have moved on over to the next page, and on this one I've got a gratitude log. Having a space for gratitude is something that I do on and off in my bullet journal, but since making my video on spreads for mental health, I've been really keen to reincorporate gratitude into my journal. For this one, I'm just putting in a line for each day of the month where I can write something that I'm grateful for that day. The rest of the page, as you can tell, is going to be for decoration with more of those fireflies and the blue waves. This spread altogether is probably my favourite from the setup. I love the little boxes for the book tracker. I love the blue and gold combination. I think the decoration turned out really well. But of course, because it was my favorite, it was also the longest to set up. So this spread in total took about 54 minutes to set up. Again, this is from first touch of the pen to final erasings, so it doesn't include idea generation time or sketching in time. Flipping over though, and we're on to a new thing for me, which is an energy tracker. This one is just set up as a typical grid with enough rows for each of the days of the month and 5 columns. Each of those columns are going to represent how my energy is at a particular time of the day. And the times of the day that I'm going for are 9 AM, 12 PM, midday, 3 PM, 6 PM, and 9 PM. I figured that having it in 3-hour increments gave me enough separation between those times for my energy to possibly change, but also covered enough of the day that I could actually see patterns in my energy levels. Effectively, what I'm trying to investigate here are my energy cycles. So are there particular points in the day where I start to feel more lethargic? Or are there particular days of the week or times in the month that my energy is a bit more drained? Ideally, I would also combine this with a sleep log, but I think that just having the energy tracker is going to be enough newness for 1 month. On the right hand side of this spread though is where my September in reflection page is going to be. Monthly reflection is something that I'm super into, but when it comes to actually filling in my reflection pages, I get a little bit slack. Because of this, I don't want to use the same layout that I have been using previously this year. I want to try something new, but I haven't quite decided what sections I want yet. So on this page, all I'm setting up today is the header and the little decoration in the corner. Getting into our flip through, as I said, oh my lord, I am apocalyptically chuffed with how this setup turned out. I love the blue, I love the gold, I think the Fireflies are super stinking cute. Not to mention just the B6 size in general, I think that having the smaller size makes me more likely to actually put decoration on the page because it seems less intimidating. There's less space to fill up. Having said that, I am very curious to see how weekly setups in this go. But if you want to see a weekly setup in my B6, you're gonna have to come and join our Patreon team. As always team, thank you for watching, and until next time, bye!